The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the small wooden platform that served as Trinity's depot, and Adelaide Chapman pressed her gloved hand against the window, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. 3 weeks of travel from Philadelphia had brought her here to this dusty Texas town in the summer of 1878, and now she would have to face the man who had paid for her passage, the man who expected a wife who could read his letters and manage his household accounts. The advertisement had been very specific about those requirements, and Adelaide had lied in every response she had written, or rather, had paid a scribe to write for her. The door swung open, and the driver offered his weathered hand to help her down. Adelaide stepped onto the sun-baked street, her dark traveling dress already too warm in the oppressive heat. She clutched her small carpetbag and looked around at the buildings that lined the dusty main road. Trinity was smaller than she had imagined, just a handful of structures that seemed to huddle together against the vast emptiness of the Texas plains stretching in every direction. A tall man separated himself from the shade of the general store's awning and walked toward her with measured steps. He wore work-worn denim pants, a blue cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. As he drew closer, Adelaide could make out strong features, sun-bronzed skin, and eyes the color of Texas bluebonnets that regarded her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Miss Chapman." His voice was deep and warm like whiskey over honey. "Yes," Adelaide managed, her voice barely above a whisper, "and you must be Mr. Barrett." "Thomas Barrett, madam, but most folks just call me Thomas." He reached for her bag, and she noticed his hands were large and calloused from hard work. "Welcome to Trinity. I hope your journey was not too difficult." "It was long," Adelaide admitted, trying to keep her voice steady, "but I am grateful to have arrived safely." Thomas nodded and gestured down the street. "My wagon is just over there. The ranch is about 5 miles outside of town." "It is not much, but it is home, and I hope you will find it comfortable enough." They walked in awkward silence to where a sturdy wagon waited, hitched to 2 patient horses. Thomas placed her bag in the back and then offered his hand to help her up onto the seat. His grip was firm and steady, and Adelaide felt a flutter of something she could not quite name as she settled onto the rough wooden bench. The ride out of town gave Adelaide her first real view of Texas. The landscape was nothing like Philadelphia with its crowded streets and tall buildings. Here, the sky seemed impossibly large, stretching from horizon to horizon in a brilliant blue expanse. Prairie grass swayed in the hot breeze, and in the distance, she could see the dark shapes of cattle grazing. "I should tell you," Thomas said after they had ridden in silence for several minutes, "that I am not much of a talker. My wife, she died 3 years back, and I have gotten used to the quiet, but I will do my best to make you feel welcome." Adelaide's heart clenched. The advertisement had not mentioned a previous wife. "I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you, madam. Sarah was a good woman. Fever took her one winter, and there was nothing anyone could do." He kept his eyes on the road ahead. "I should also tell you that I have expectations for my wife. The ranch requires someone who can keep accounts, read correspondence from buyers, and help with the administrative work. My hand, Miguel, is good with the cattle, but neither of us has much education. That is why I specifically needed someone who could read and write well." Adelaide felt her stomach drop. This was the moment she had been dreading since she had first seen the advertisement in the Philadelphia newspaper. She gripped her hands together in her lap, her palms damp despite the dry heat. "Mr. Barrett, I must tell you something, and I hope you will not be too angry." Thomas glanced at her, his brow furrowing slightly. "What is it?" "I cannot read or write." The words came out in a rush. "I know your advertisement specified that requirement, and I know I should have been honest from the start, but I was desperate. My father died 6 months ago, and he left nothing but debts. My landlord was going to put me out on the street, and I had nowhere to go, no family to turn to. When I saw your advertisement, I thought maybe this was my only chance. I paid a scribe to write all my letters to you. I am so sorry for deceiving you." She closed her eyes, waiting for his anger, waiting for him to turn the wagon around and take her back to town. Instead, there was only silence. After a long moment, she dared to open her eyes and look at him. Thomas was staring straight ahead, his jaw working as he processed what she had told him. "Can you cook?" he asked finally. Adelaide blinked, surprised by the question. "Yes, sir. I worked in my father's boarding house for years. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, tend a garden, and manage a household. Can you work hard without complaining? I can, and I will." Thomas was quiet for another long moment, and Adelaide held her breath. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Then I will teach you to read and write. It will take time and patience, but if you are willing to learn, I am willing to teach." Adelaide stared at him in disbelief. "You would do that, after I lied to you?" "I do not appreciate the deception," Thomas said, his voice serious but not unkind. "But I understand desperation. I understand what it means to have nowhere else to turn. And I need a wife, Miss Chapman. I need someone to help run this ranch and to share the burden of this life. If you are willing to work hard and learn, then we can make this arrangement work." Tears pricked Adelaide's eyes, but she blinked them back. "Thank you, Mr. Barrett. I promise I will not disappoint you. Call me Thomas," he said, and for the first time since she had met him, the corner of his mouth lifted in something that might have been a smile. "And I will call you Adelaide if that suits you." "It suits me just fine," she replied, feeling something warm unfurl in her chest. The ranch house came into view a few minutes later, a sturdy wooden structure with a wide porch and a stone chimney. It was not large, but it looked well maintained and solid. A barn stood nearby, and Adelaide could see several horses in a corral. Everything was neat and organized, speaking to the character of the man who owned it. Thomas helped her down from the wagon and carried her bag to the house. Inside, the main room was simply furnished with a table, chairs, a sofa, and a stone fireplace. A doorway led to what Adelaide assumed was the bedroom, and another door opened to what looked like a small kitchen. "I will sleep in the barn for now," Thomas said, setting her bag down. "Until we are properly married. The ceremony is set for tomorrow afternoon. Reverend Walsh will come out from town." Adelaide nodded, grateful for his consideration. "That is very kind of you. I will introduce you to Miguel in the morning. He lives in the small cabin behind the barn. For tonight, I will leave you to get settled. There is food in the kitchen, and you should find everything you need. If you require anything, just ring the bell on the porch, and I will hear it from the barn." After Thomas left, Adelaide explored her new home with a mixture of anxiety and relief. The house was clean but sparse, clearly the domain of a man who spent most of his time working outdoors. She found bread, cheese, and dried meat in the kitchen, along with a good supply of coffee and flour. There was a well outside with fresh water, and the bedroom contained a large bed with a simple quilt, a wardrobe, and a washstand. As the sun set and painted the Texas sky in shades of orange and purple, Adelaide sat on the porch and watched the land darken around her. She thought about the life she had left behind in Philadelphia, the cramped boarding house rooms and the constant struggle to make ends meet after her father died. She thought about the fear that had driven her to answer Thomas's advertisement, and the even greater fear she had felt knowing she could not fulfill his most important requirement. But Thomas had not sent her away. Instead, he had offered her something she had never expected: patience and understanding. She did not know him yet, did not know if they could build a real marriage together, but for the first time in months she felt a flicker of hope. The next morning, Adelaide woke early and set about making herself useful. She found eggs in the henhouse behind the barn and made breakfast, strong coffee and scrambled eggs with bread toasted over the fire. When Thomas came in from his morning chores, he looked surprised to find the table set and food waiting. "You did not have to do this," he said, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. "I wanted to," Adelaide replied. "I meant what I said about earning my place here." They ate together in companionable silence, and afterward, Thomas introduced her to Miguel, a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Welcome, Senora," Miguel said, his accent thick but his English clear. "It will be good to have a woman here again. This place has been too quiet for too long." The ceremony that afternoon was simple. Reverend Walsh arrived in a dusty black coat, and Miguel stood as witness. Adelaide wore the best dress she had brought, a simple blue cotton that she had pressed that morning. Thomas had changed into a clean shirt and had even shaved, and Adelaide noticed for the first time how handsome he was when he was not shadowed by trail dust and exhaustion. The vows were traditional, and when Thomas placed a simple gold band on her finger, Adelaide felt the weight of commitment settle over her. This was real now. She was married to this man, bound to him by law and by faith, and she could only hope that they would find a way to make it work. That evening, after a quiet supper, Thomas brought a wooden crate into the house and set it on the table. "I thought we could start tonight," he said, "with your lessons." Adelaide felt her stomach clench with nervousness. She had always been ashamed of her inability to read, had hidden it for years, making excuses and avoiding situations where it would be revealed. Now she would have to confront that shame directly. Thomas pulled several items from the crate, a slate board, chalk, a primer, and several sheets of paper with writing on them. He sat down at the table and gestured for Adelaide to sit beside him. "First," he said, "I want you to understand that there is no shame in not knowing. Plenty of good people never learn their letters, but there is great power in reading and writing, and once you have that power, no one can take it from you." He opened the primer to the first page, which showed the alphabet in neat rows. "We will start with the basics. Each letter has a name and a sound, and when you put them together, they make words." Adelaide leaned forward, studying the strange symbols that had always seemed like mysteries to her. Thomas pointed to the first letter. "This is A. It sounds like the beginning of your name, Adelaide." "A," Adelaide repeated softly. "That is right." Thomas moved to the next letter. "This is B. It makes a sound like this, buh, as in Barrett." They worked through the entire alphabet, Thomas patiently repeating each letter and its sound while Adelaide did her best to memorize them. His voice was steady and encouraging, never showing frustration when she confused letters or forgot their sounds. By the time the lamp oil was running low, Adelaide could recognize about half the letters. "That is excellent progress," Thomas said, closing the primer. "We will practice more tomorrow." Adelaide rubbed her tired eyes. "Thank you for being so patient with me." Thomas looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "My mother taught me to read when I was a boy. She said it was the greatest gift she could give me. I am just passing that gift along." Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Adelaide rose early to make breakfast and tend to the chickens and the garden. Thomas and Miguel worked with the cattle, mending fences and preparing for the autumn roundup. In the evenings, after supper was cleared away, Thomas would bring out the slate and primer, and they would work on Adelaide's lessons. Adelaide proved to be a dedicated student. Every spare moment she had during the day, she practiced writing letters on scraps of paper or tracing them in the dust of the porch floor. Thomas had shown her how to write her name, and she spent hours perfecting the curves and lines until she could write Adelaide Barrett without hesitation. One evening, about a month after her arrival, Adelaide successfully read her first complete sentence from the primer. The cat sat on the mat. It was simple, almost childish, but to her it represented a victory she had never thought possible. She looked up at Thomas with tears in her eyes. "I read it," she whispered. "I actually read it." Thomas smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed his usually serious face. "You did. I am proud of you." Something shifted between them in that moment. Adelaide realized that she had been so focused on learning, so anxious about proving her worth, that she had not noticed how comfortable she had become in Thomas's presence. She no longer felt nervous when he sat close to her during lessons, guiding her hand as she formed letters. She found herself looking forward to their evenings together, to the quiet intimacy of the lessons and the satisfaction of mastering something new. Thomas, for his part, seemed to be opening up as well. He talked more during their evening sessions, telling her about his life before she arrived. He had been born in Missouri, had come to Texas with his parents as a teenager, and had built his ranch from nothing over the course of 15 years. His first wife, Sarah, had been his childhood sweetheart, and her death had nearly destroyed him. "I did not think I would ever want to marry again," he admitted one night. "But the loneliness became too much. A man needs someone to share his life with, someone to work alongside and talk to at the end of the day." "And do you feel less lonely now?" Adelaide asked quietly. Thomas met her eyes. "Yes, I do." As summer faded into autumn, Adelaide's reading improved dramatically. She could now read simple stories and had started working on writing letters. Thomas had also begun teaching her basic arithmetic so she could help with the ranch accounts. The work was challenging, but Adelaide attacked it with determination, refusing to give up even when the numbers seemed to swim before her tired eyes. The ranch kept them both busy. Adelaide learned how to preserve vegetables from the garden, how to churn butter, and how to manage the household with the efficiency of someone who had been doing it for years. She took pride in keeping the house clean and welcoming, in making meals that Thomas and Miguel praised, and in slowly becoming part of the rhythm of ranch life. One cool October evening, as they sat together on the porch after supper, Thomas turned to Adelaide with a serious expression. "I have a confession to make." Adelaide set down her mending, her heart suddenly racing. "What is it?" "When I first placed that advertisement, I thought I needed a wife who could read and write because I believed those skills were the most important things. But I have learned something these past months. The most important thing is not what someone knows, but who they are. You work harder than anyone I have ever met. You never complain, even when I know you are exhausted. You have brought warmth and life back to this house. And you have shown me that sometimes the greatest strength is the willingness to admit what you do not know and to learn." Adelaide felt her cheeks warm. "Thomas, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know that I am grateful you came here, even if it started with a deception. I think it was meant to be." Adelaide looked out at the darkening landscape, at the stars beginning to appear in the vast Texas sky. "I am grateful too. I came here expecting to fulfill an obligation, to play a role in exchange for security. But it has become so much more than that." Thomas reached over and took her hand, the first time he had truly touched her since the day they were married. His palm was warm and rough against hers. "I would like this to be a real marriage, Adelaide. Not just an arrangement, but a true partnership. If that is something you might want as well." Adelaide turned to look at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, the hope tempered by fear of rejection. She thought about the man he had proven himself to be over these past months, patient, kind, hardworking, and honest. She thought about how her heart had begun to beat faster when she heard his footsteps on the porch, how she had started to care deeply about his opinions and his happiness. "I would like that very much," she said softly. Thomas lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Then we will build something real together." That night, for the first time since their wedding, Thomas did not return to the barn. They came together tentatively at first, both nervous despite being married for months. But the awkwardness faded as they discovered each other, as they learned the language of touch and intimacy that reading and writing could never capture. Adelaide fell asleep in Thomas's arms, feeling safer and more content than she had ever felt in her life. The following weeks brought a deepening of their relationship. They still had their evening lessons, but now those sessions were punctuated by stolen kisses and shared laughter. Adelaide continued to improve, and by November she was able to read Thomas's correspondence and even help him draft letters to cattle buyers. One afternoon, Thomas came back from town with a package wrapped in brown paper. He handed it to Adelaide with a shy smile. "I thought you might like this." Adelaide unwrapped the package to find a leather-bound journal with blank pages and a beautiful fountain pen. She looked up at Thomas in surprise. "What is this for?" "It is for you to write in," Thomas said. "Your thoughts, your experiences, anything you want. You have worked so hard to learn, and I thought you might enjoy having something that is just yours." Adelaide hugged the journal to her chest, overwhelmed with emotion. That evening she made her first entry, carefully forming each word. "Today Thomas gave me this journal. I never thought I would be able to write my own words, but here they are. I am learning that life can surprise you in the most wonderful ways. I came to Texas as a mail-order bride who could not read or write, and I found a man who saw past my limitations to the person I could become. I think I am falling in love with him." Winter came to the Texas plains, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. The ranch work slowed, giving Thomas and Adelaide more time together. They spent long evenings by the fire, Thomas reading aloud from books while Adelaide knitted or mended. Sometimes Adelaide would read as well, her voice growing stronger and more confident with each page. Thomas taught her other things too. He showed her how to ride a horse, patiently guiding her through the basics until she could ride out to check on the cattle with him. He taught her to recognize different breeds, to spot a sick animal, and to understand the business side of ranching. Adelaide absorbed it all, her quick mind and determination making her an apt pupil. Miguel approved of the changes in his boss. One day, while Adelaide was helping him sort supplies in the barn, he said, "Senor Thomas is a different man now. Before you came, he was just going through the motions, working to keep busy so he would not have to think. Now he has life in his eyes again. You are good for him, Senora." "He is good for me too," Adelaide replied. "He believed in me when I had no reason to believe in myself." Christmas came, and Adelaide surprised Thomas by cooking a feast that rivaled anything he had eaten in the finest restaurants. She had traded eggs and butter in town for special ingredients and had spent days preparing. They invited Miguel to join them, and the three of them celebrated together, sharing stories and laughter late into the night. On New Year's Day 1879, Adelaide wrote in her journal, "A new year has begun, and I am a new person from who I was when I arrived in Trinity. I can read and write. I can manage a household and help run a ranch. But more importantly, I have found love. Real, deep love that makes every day brighter. Thomas is my husband, my teacher, and my best friend. I could not ask for more." January brought a harsh, cold snap that kept everyone working hard to protect the livestock. One night, after a particularly difficult day of breaking ice on water troughs and ensuring the cattle had shelter, Thomas came in exhausted. Adelaide had hot coffee and a warm meal waiting, and after he had eaten, she led him to the bedroom and helped him out of his frozen clothes. "What would I do without you?" Thomas murmured as Adelaide wrapped him in a quilt. "You will never have to find out," Adelaide replied, climbing into bed beside him and holding him until his shivering stopped. By February, Adelaide could not only read and write proficiently, but had also taken over all the ranch's bookkeeping. She discovered she had a natural aptitude for numbers and organization, and she found ways to streamline their operations and cut costs. Thomas was impressed and grateful, often telling her that she was a better partner than he could have ever hoped for. One evening in late February, Adelaide realized she had not had her monthly courses in some time. She felt different too, her breasts tender and her stomach occasionally queasy in the mornings. She did not say anything to Thomas right away, not wanting to raise his hopes until she was certain, but by early March she could no longer deny the truth. She told him one evening after supper, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "Thomas, I think I am going to have a baby." Thomas's eyes widened, and for a moment he simply stared at her. Then a smile spread across his face, broader and more joyful than Adelaide had ever seen. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be. I thought we could have the doctor from town come out to confirm it." Thomas laughed, a sound of pure happiness. "A baby, Adelaide, this is wonderful news." The doctor confirmed Adelaide's suspicions a week later. The baby would arrive sometime in October. Thomas immediately became protective, insisting that Adelaide rest more and not overwork herself. Adelaide found his concern endearing but also slightly frustrating, as she was still perfectly capable of her normal duties. "I am pregnant, not ill," she told him one afternoon when he tried to stop her from carrying a basket of laundry. "Women have been having babies and working at the same time since the beginning of humanity." "I know," Thomas said sheepishly, "but you are my wife, and this is our baby, and I worry." Adelaide softened and kissed his cheek. "I will be careful, I promise, but I need to keep working. It makes me feel useful and strong." As spring bloomed across the Texas plains, turning the landscape green and covering it with wildflowers, Adelaide continued her daily routines with some modifications for her growing belly. She also continued to write in her journal, documenting her thoughts about the coming baby and her growing love for Thomas. One entry from April read, "Thomas has become even more attentive, if that is possible. He brings me flowers from the prairie, helps with chores I could easily do myself, and talks to my belly every night before we sleep. He tells the baby stories about the ranch, about the horses and cattle, about the big sky and wide land. I think he will be a wonderful father." Thomas had his own thoughts about impending fatherhood. One night, as they lay in bed with his hand resting on Adelaide's rounded stomach, he said, "I want our child to have every opportunity, Adelaide. I want them to learn to read and write from the start, to have access to books and education. I want them to have choices I never had." "They will," Adelaide assured him. "We will make sure of it together." Summer brought intense heat and hard work as they prepared for the birth. Adelaide sewed baby clothes, Thomas built a cradle from smooth pine wood, and Miguel's wife, Rosa, who Adelaide had befriended during trips to town, promised to come help when the baby arrived. In July, Adelaide had advanced enough in her reading that Thomas brought home a novel from town, a story about adventure and romance. They read it together in the evenings, taking turns with chapters, and Adelaide marveled at how far she had come. A year ago, the pages would have been meaningless marks to her. Now they opened up entire worlds. August brought preparations for the cattle drive to market. Thomas would need to be gone for 2 weeks, and he was torn between his responsibilities to the ranch and his desire to stay close to Adelaide. "Go," Adelaide told him firmly. "Miguel will be here, and Rosa has promised to check on me every day. The baby is not due for another 2 months. Everything will be fine." Thomas reluctantly agreed, but extracted a promise that Adelaide would send for him immediately if anything seemed wrong. The day he left, he held her for a long time, his hand resting protectively over their child. "I will be back before you know it," he promised. "And when I return, we will start planning for the future. I have been thinking about expanding the ranch, maybe buying the property to the east. We could build a bigger house, one with a proper room for the baby and maybe a library for all those books you will want." Adelaide smiled. "That sounds wonderful. Now go, before you miss meeting the other ranchers." The 2 weeks Thomas was gone passed slowly. Adelaide missed him more than she had expected, missed his steady presence and the comfort of his arms at night. But she kept busy, preserving vegetables from the garden, sewing and practicing her writing. She wrote Thomas a letter, even though he would be home before it could reach him, just to practice expressing her feelings in words. "My dearest Thomas," she wrote, "the house feels empty without you. I find myself listening for your footsteps and turning to tell you something, only to remember you are not here. But I am well, and the baby is active, kicking strongly, especially at night. I think our child is eager to meet you. Come home safely to us. All my love, Adelaide." When Thomas returned, tired and dusty from the drive but with excellent news about prices, he swept Adelaide into his arms and kissed her thoroughly. "I missed you terribly," he said against her hair. "I never want to be away from you that long again." "Then do not be," Adelaide replied. "Next year, Miguel can take the cattle to market, or you can hire someone. Your place is here with your family." September arrived with cooler temperatures and the beginning of autumn colors. Adelaide's belly was now quite large and she moved more slowly, but she was healthy and in good spirits. She had everything ready for the baby. Tiny clothes, soft blankets, the beautiful cradle Thomas had made, and a store of knowledge from Rosa and other experienced mothers. One afternoon, in late September, Adelaide was sitting on the porch writing in her journal when she felt the first contraction. It was not painful, just a tightening across her belly, but she recognized it for what it was. She calmly finished her sentence, marked her page, and went to find Thomas. He was in the barn with Miguel, and when she told him the baby was coming, he went pale. "Now, are you certain?" "These things take time," Adelaide said with more confidence than she felt. "But yes, I am certain. Can you please ride to town and fetch Rosa and the doctor?" Thomas ran for his horse while Miguel helped Adelaide back to the house. Rosa arrived within an hour, her calm competence immediately reassuring. The doctor came an hour after that, examined Adelaide, and pronounced that everything was progressing normally. "It will likely be several more hours," he told Thomas, who was pacing the main room like a caged animal. "First babies take their time. Why do not you go outside and let Rosa and me handle this?" But Thomas refused to leave. He stayed by Adelaide's side through the long afternoon and into the evening, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, and murmuring encouragement. Adelaide drew strength from his presence, from the love in his eyes and the steadiness of his voice. As the moon rose over the Texas plains, Adelaide gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Thomas cut the cord with shaking hands, and when the doctor placed the baby in Adelaide's arms, both parents wept with joy. "He is perfect," Thomas whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Daniel Thomas Barrett, and from the moment he entered the world, he became the center of their universe. Thomas proved to be as devoted a father as Adelaide had predicted, waking with her for nighttime feedings even though he had to work the next day, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours just watching his son sleep. Adelaide wrote in her journal a week after Daniel's birth. "I thought I knew what love was. I love Thomas with all my heart, but the love I feel for this tiny person is something entirely different, something fierce and protective and all-consuming. Thomas feels it too. I see it in the way he looks at our son, in the gentleness of his touch and the wonder in his eyes. We have created a family, something I never thought I would have." As autumn deepened into winter, the Barrett family settled into new routines. Adelaide had less time for lessons now, but she made a point of reading every day, even if it was just a few pages while Daniel napped. Thomas continued to share the ranch business with her, valuing her opinions and insights. One December evening, as they sat by the fire with Daniel asleep in his cradle, Thomas said, "Do you remember the day you arrived? When you told me you could not read or write, how could I forget?" Adelaide replied. "I was terrified you would send me back." "I almost did," Thomas admitted. "I was angry about the deception, and I felt betrayed. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the honesty in your eyes when you confessed, or the desperation in your voice. I saw someone who needed help, and I had the power to give it. I never imagined that decision would bring me so much happiness." Adelaide reached over and took his hand. "You gave me more than literacy, Thomas. You gave me confidence, purpose, and love. You saw potential in me that I did not see in myself. You changed my entire life." "And you changed mine," Thomas said. "You brought light and laughter back to this house. You made me believe in second chances and new beginnings. I love you, Adelaide Barrett." "I love you too, Thomas, more than I can ever express in words, written or spoken." They kissed, a tender reaffirmation of the bond they had forged through patience, teaching, and growing love. Daniel stirred in his cradle, and they both smiled, knowing their son was the living embodiment of everything they had built together. The winter passed peacefully. Adelaide continued to improve her skills, and by spring, she was corresponding regularly with Thomas's business contacts and even writing letters for Miguel, who had never learned to read or write in English. She also started teaching Miguel's oldest grandson, a bright boy of 10 who was eager to learn. "I am passing along the gift you gave me," Adelaide told Thomas one evening after the boy's lesson. "Just as you said your mother did for you." Thomas smiled. "That is exactly as it should be. Knowledge should be shared, not hoarded." By the time Daniel celebrated his first birthday in October 1880, the Barrett Ranch had expanded significantly. Thomas had bought the neighboring property, and they were in the process of building a larger house, one with space for more children, a library, and a dedicated office for Adelaide to manage the ranch accounts. Adelaide was pregnant again, this time expecting in the spring. Thomas was just as protective and devoted as he had been the first time, maybe even more so now that he knew what to expect. Daniel was growing into a lively toddler, already showing signs of his father's determination and his mother's quick mind. One evening, as they walked through the partially completed new house, Thomas put his arm around Adelaide and said, "Did you ever imagine your life would turn out like this?" Adelaide leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body and the gentle flutter of the new baby in her womb. "Never. When I got on that stagecoach in Philadelphia, I thought I was traveling to fulfill an obligation, to escape poverty by becoming someone's wife in name only. I never dreamed I would find true love, or that I would become educated, or that I would help build something lasting." "We built it together," Thomas said. "Every bit of it." The second baby, a daughter they named Sarah Grace after Thomas's first wife and Adelaide's mother, arrived in April 1881. She had Adelaide's dark hair and Thomas's blue eyes, and she completed their family in a way that felt absolutely right. Daniel was fascinated by his baby sister, insisting on helping with everything and bringing her toys and flowers. The new house was finished that summer, a beautiful two-story structure with large windows that let in the Texas sunshine, and a wide porch where the family could sit together in the evenings. The library Thomas had promised was Adelaide's favorite room, already filling with books she ordered from catalogs and purchased on trips to town. In August, Adelaide made a special trip to town with Thomas. She had been working on something for months, practicing and perfecting it in secret. At the telegraph office, she sent a message to a publisher in Philadelphia, the same publisher who had printed the newspaper containing Thomas's original advertisement. The message read, "To any woman considering becoming a mail-order bride, have courage. Yes, it is frightening to travel to an unknown place to marry an unknown man. But sometimes that leap of faith leads to extraordinary happiness. I came to Texas, barely educated and fearful, and I found a man who saw me not for what I lacked, but for what I could become. He taught me to read and write with patience and kindness, and in the process, we built a true partnership and a deep love. Do not be afraid to reach for the life you want. Sometimes the greatest risks bring the greatest rewards." Adelaide Barrett, Trinity, Texas. Thomas read the message over her shoulder and pulled her close. "You wrote that all by yourself." "Every word," Adelaide said proudly. "I wanted other women to know that there is hope, even in the most uncertain circumstances." They never knew if the message was published, but it did not matter. Adelaide had expressed what was in her heart, had used the skills Thomas taught her to give voice to her gratitude and hope. The years that followed were full and happy. The ranch continued to prosper under their joint management. Adelaide's literacy and business sense proved invaluable, and Thomas's hard work and knowledge of cattle ranching made them one of the most successful operations in the region. They had 2 more children, another son named James in 1883, and a daughter named Elizabeth in 1885. The house that had once seemed so large was now filled with the noise and laughter of 4 children, and Adelaide could not imagine it any other way. Thomas never stopped being patient, never stopped teaching. He taught all their children to read and write, often using the same primer he had used with Adelaide. He taught them about the ranch, about responsibility and hard work, and about the importance of seeing potential in others. Adelaide never forgot where she had come from or how far she had traveled. She taught school in Trinity for several years, offering free lessons to anyone who wanted to learn, children and adults alike. She became known throughout the county as someone who believed everyone deserved the chance to improve themselves. On their 10th wedding anniversary in October 1889, Thomas gave Adelaide a gift that made her cry. It was a leather-bound book with her name stamped in gold on the cover. Inside were all the letters she had supposedly written to him before they married, the ones she had paid a scribe to create. "I kept them all these years," Thomas said. "I thought you might want to see them, to remember where you started." Adelaide read through the letters, seeing the formal language and perfect penmanship that had never been hers. Then she pulled out her journal, now in its 5th volume, and showed Thomas her most recent entry, written in her own hand, confident and clear. "Look how far I have come," she said. "Look at what you helped me become." "Look at what we built together," Thomas corrected, pulling her into his arms. "I may have taught you to read and write, Adelaide, but you taught me how to love again, how to open my heart after loss. You showed me that sometimes broken things, whether they are hearts or dreams or lives, can be put back together into something even stronger than before." They stood together on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard while the sun set over the Texas plains. The land stretched out around them, familiar and beloved, a testament to everything they had worked for and achieved. Adelaide thought about the frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach 11 years earlier, desperate and dishonest, with no prospects and no hope. She thought about the man who had every right to be angry at her deception, but who had chosen patience and understanding instead. And she thought about the family they had created together, built on a foundation of teaching and learning, of seeing past limitations to possibilities. "I love you, Thomas Barrett," she said, the words she had learned to write so carefully now flowing easily from her lips. "Thank you for believing in me." "I love you, Adelaide Barrett," Thomas replied. "Thank you for giving me a reason to believe again." Inside the house, in the library that had once seemed like an impossible dream, shelves full of books waited to be read. Adelaide's journals documented their journey from strangers to partners to soulmates. And on the desk, a fresh piece of paper waited for whatever story they would write next. The mail-order bride who could not read or write had become a woman of learning and confidence. The lonely cowboy who had lost his first love had found an even deeper love the second time around. Together, they had built not just a successful ranch, but a legacy of patience, determination, and the transformative power of seeing potential where others might only see limitations. As the stars emerged in the vast Texas sky and the children were called in for supper, Thomas and Adelaide remained on the porch a moment longer, hands clasped, hearts full. Their story had begun with a lie born of desperation and a choice born of compassion. It had continued through hard work, patience, and the slow building of trust and affection. And it would go on, they both knew, for the rest of their lives, each day adding another line to the story they were writing together. The ranch would continue to grow. The children would grow up, learn to read and write, and make their own way in the world. Thomas and Adelaide would grow old together, sitting on this same porch and remembering the day they met, the day Adelaide confessed her secret, and the day Thomas said those life-changing words, "Then I will teach you with patience." Years later, when Adelaide was in her 60s and Thomas in his 70s, they would sit with their grandchildren and tell them the story of how they met. The children would marvel at the idea of someone not knowing how to read and would ask Adelaide to show them her first journal entries, laughing at the shaky letters and comparing them to the confident script she wrote with in her later years. "Your grandmother was the bravest person I ever met," Thomas would tell the children. "She admitted her weakness and asked for help, and then she worked harder than anyone to overcome it. That takes more courage than any gunfight or cattle drive." "And your grandfather," Adelaide would add, "saw past my limitations to the person I could become. He gave me the tools to change my life, and he did it with kindness and patience. That is real strength." But all of that was still to come. On this October evening in 1889, Thomas and Adelaide simply stood together, grateful for what they had and excited for what lay ahead. The wild Texas land surrounded them, challenging and beautiful, requiring strength and perseverance, but offering rewards beyond measure to those willing to work for them. Just like their marriage, Adelaide thought. Just like everything worth having in this life. Thomas squeezed her hand gently, and together they walked inside to join their family for supper, closing one chapter of their day and preparing for the next. The lessons that had brought them together continued in different forms, but the foundation remained the same: patience, faith in each other's potential, and love that grew stronger with every challenge overcome. It was not the ending Adelaide had imagined when she had boarded that stagecoach in Philadelphia so many years ago. It was infinitely better. She had found not just security or obligation, but purpose, partnership, and a love that filled every corner of her heart. And it had all started with a confession, a moment of honesty born from desperation, and a cowboy's patient reply that changed everything. "Then I will teach you with patience." Those words had opened a door to a life Adelaide never thought possible. They had given her education, confidence, and love. They had given her Thomas, their children, and a home that was truly hers. They had given her everything. As the family gathered around the table that night, Thomas led them in grace, thanking God for their blessings and for bringing them all together. Adelaide added her own silent prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, for every challenge and triumph, for every lesson learned and every word written. The mail-order bride who could not read or write had become so much more. She was a wife, a mother, a teacher, a partner, and a woman who had proven that it was never too late to learn, to grow, or to find love. And she owed it all to a patient cowboy who had seen her not for what she lacked, but for what she could become. That was the real story, Adelaide thought as she looked around the table at her family. Not just the story of learning to read and write, but the story of two people who had taken a chance on each other and built something beautiful from that leap of faith. It was a story that would continue for the rest of their lives, adding new chapters, new adventures, and new reasons to be grateful. Outside, the Texas night deepened, stars brilliant against the velvet darkness. Inside, the Barrett family was together, safe and happy and loved. And somewhere in the library, Adelaide's journals waited to record the next chapter of their story, written in her own hand, confident and clear, a testament to how far she had come and how far they would go together. It was, in every way that mattered, a perfect ending. But it was also a perfect beginning, because every night they went to bed was the start of a new day, a new chance to love each other, to teach their children, and to continue building the life they had chosen together. The story that had begun with patience and hope would continue the same way, carried forward by the love and dedication of two people who had found each other against all odds and created something lasting. Adelaide Barrett, who had once been unable to write her own name, now wrote the story of her life with confidence and joy. And that story, like all the best love stories, would endure long after she and Thomas were gone, passed down through generations as a testament to the power of patience, faith, and love. The end.